Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Friends, we have been thinking about the great women of India, and we shall continue with some more thoughts on some more women today. I'm immediately reminded of the name Uma. We all know Uma is the name given to goddess Parvati. She is called Uma. Why was she called Uma? There is a beautiful reply given by Kalidasa. Uma, of course, is a name which has several explanations, but then Kalidasa uses a sense of creativity and gives a different kind of an explanation. He says, this little girl Uma, as she was the foster daughter of Himavan and his wife Kanchanamala, was just walking like that. Where was this little girl going? She told the mother, Amma, I'm going to do tapas. I'm going to the sides of the Himalayas to perform penance. So as this little girl of 6 years of age was walking, the mother was shocked to know that this little girl was wanting to perform tapas. So the mother said, don't go, you're too young to do tapas. That is what the mother's reaction would be, isn't it? Small little girl of 6 years of age walking to do tapas, telling the mother, Amma, I'm going away, bye-bye, I'm going to do tapas. And the mother running behind and saying, don't go. And as the mother screamed, don't go, what did she say? She said, oh, ma is don't. So, don't go. In her hurry and haste, she screamed, oh, ma, and that ma became ma, says Kalidasa. There, of course, are other explanations to the name, but then this beautiful scene picturized by Kalidasa tells us as to what kind of vairagya did that little girl have. She is Shakti. In the Indian tradition, women are regarded as personification of Shakti. Shakti will mean energy. Here is a tradition which makes energy a feminine form, which gives a feminine form to energy. And that is why it is customary to say that Lakshmi is the Shakti of Vishnu, Parvati is the Shakti of Shiva, and of course Saraswati, the Shakti of Brahma. We also find this in iconography and in the way we talk about these devas and devatas. Where does Saraswati reside? We generally say Saraswati resides on the tongue of Brahma. Why? Brahma, as the deity of Kalvi or Vidya, will have to use the tongue for chanting the mantras. So, if the tongue has to have that power, that dharmic power for chanting, Saraswati will have to reside there, which only means all the power and the energy of Brahma is derived only from Saraswati, and Saraswati is his power. And that is why she is the Vallabha. Similarly, we find Vishnu's power is Lakshmi, and she resides in the chest of Vishnu. Why? Vishnu is the deity of Aishwarya, of wealth. If you need to give Aishwarya to someone else, if you need to give wealth to someone else, you should have the mind. And it is with the mind, the benevolence of the mind, that he has to be the protector of the universe. So she resides in the chest and decides on the protection aspect. And for the Lord of Samhara, she becomes part of him because she will have to be prowess, she will have to be virya, and she will have to be the component of valor. This is how the Indian tradition has personified the feminine aspect. Women are embodiment of Shakti, embodiment of energy. There is a concept of Purushakara in Sri Vaishnava. What is this concept of Purushakara? Generally in a Vishnu temple, especially the South Indian Vishnu temples, there is a particular way in which one is supposed to worship. As you enter the temple, you get into the prakara, or the place, the circumambulatory passage. You get into that circumambulatory passage, you walk around, reach the sanctum sanctorum, or the sannidhi of the goddess, of the mother. She is called the mother or the Tayar. You worship there and then still go around the circumambulatory passage, reach the sannidhi of Andal, who is also the mother, worship there, and then come around and then get into the sanctum sanctorum of the God himself. Why this system? It is said that as you reach the sannidhi of Tayar, or the mother, she looks at you. She understands as to why you have come there, what are your prayers, what are the problems that you have in your worldly life. And then by the time you go around and reach the sanctum of the God himself, she kind of sends in her recommendation, her information to the God that this child will have to be helped. That is what is called Purushakara. She initiates and instigates him to shower his blessings on the child. What a wonderful way to think that the compassionate mother is trying to get the benevolence of the father towards the child, get all the benevolence and focus it on the child. The woman is not only energy, but then she also is compassion. And that is why it is also customary in the Indian tradition to worship the Lord in what is called the Madhurya Bhava or the Nayaki Bhava. One of the great women of India is Andal. Many of you would have heard the name of Andal. We'll just recollect as to how Andal came into existence or how the name itself was derived. Vishnu Chitta was a devotee living in a small town called Srivilliputturu. And Vishnu Chitta had a Nandavana and would make garlands to the Lord. One day Vishnu Chitta found a small little baby in his Tulasi Vana, or the place where the holy basil was growing. He was a person who was performing what is called the Pushpa Kainkariya, or he would make garlands to the Lord. And he naturally, when he saw that small little girl baby, thought of a garland and called her Kodai. Kodai in Tamil will mean a garland, a floral garland. And then Kodai grew up as his own daughter, and Vishnu Chitta was well read. Naturally, he imparted all that to Kodai also, and he continued with his practice of Pushpa Kainkariya. Every day he would make garlands, keep those garlands ready to be sent to the temple, and in the evening the garlands would go to the temple to adorn the Lord. But Vishnu Chitta was not aware that his little daughter was in the habit of wearing the garland herself every day and then keeping it back in the basket. One day Vishnu Chitta happened to see this and was shocked. We all know, we have seen the story before. We have heard of this information before. And that evening, Vishnu Chitta, as he was very shocked, did not send the garlands to the Lord. He thought the garlands have already been polluted by the touch of a human being. A human being, a girl, has draped herself on the garland, so the garlands have been polluted. He did not send the garlands to the Lord. But then that night, the Lord himself appeared in the mind of Vishnu Chitta and asked for the garland. And from then on, the garlands from Andal go to the Lord. Even today, we find garlands from Srivilliputtur go to Srirangam, go to Tirupati. In the Tirumala Brahmotsavam, on the 5th day is the Garuda Seva. And during the Garuda Seva, it is that the Lord of Tirumala, Lord Malayappa or Lord Ezhumalayan, wears the garland that comes from Srivilliputtur, the garland of Andal. Andal has sung several hymns to the Lord. And there are two collections. One collection is called the Tirupavai, or the 30 songs, and another collection is called the Nachiyar Tirumozhi, consisting of 143 songs. Let's just have a few lines from Andal's collection. In the Tirupavai, which is generally recited and chanted during the month of Margazhi or the Dhanurmasa, she narrates as to how she would perform a vrata. She is starting a nombu and then she says, this is what I will do, this is what I will not do. In management, what we call as modern tenets of management, we talk in terms of the do's and the don'ts. It is not sufficient you say do this, but it is also necessary that when you give instructions, you say don't do this, something which should not be done and something which should be done. Now Andal talks of the do's and the don'ts of the vrata. She says, வையத்து வாழ்வீர்கள் நாமும் நம் பாவைக்கு செய்யும் கிரிசைகள் கேளீரோ. You know what all we'll do? We'll rise up early in the morning, have our bath, we'll think of the Lord, we'll worship Him, but then we'll not partake with milk and milk products, the dairy products. We'll not touch ghee, and we'll think of Him, we'll worship Him, we'll do all those things which need to be done. By the way, our ancestors have told us how a vrata should be done. But we will also not do things which our ancestors have told not to do. And amidst all this, she also talks of one more thing. She says, Tirpuralai Sendrodom. We will not utter wrong words about others. We will not badmouth someone else. We will not say something which will be offensive. What a wonderful statement it is. Very often we find problems in the world. We talk about our worldly life and we say there are lots of problems everywhere. Problems in the office, problems in the atmosphere, problems in the society, problems in the school, problems at different circumstances, problems at home. Many of these problems are because people utter the wrong word. We offend someone with a wrong word. But then here is Andal who's saying, as part of worship, as part of a vrata, it is that we shall not utter the wrong word. We shall not badmouth someone else. What a wonderful command and what a wonderful lesson to remember. Many of the problems could be solved if only we decide to talk the right word and keep away the wrong word. In the same Tirupavi, she also talks of the way she would do her nonbu and worship the Lord. She says, Krishna, I have come to you. You would have to give me your benevolence. Just a while ago, we were thinking about the Purushakara of the Godmother, isn't it? Now, Andal talks about indirectly the same Purushakara. You know what she does? She wants Krishna to come out and give the benevolence. But then she realizes that it is not only calling Krishna that would matter, but then she also will have to seek the benevolence of the mother. So she calls Nappinai. Nappinai is the consort of Krishna in Ayarpad. In Gokul, Krishna is supposed to have had a consort by name Nappinna. So Andal is calling Nappinai. She says, Nappinai Nangai, please come. Please see that we are all standing for the benevolence of Krishna. And please come out and see to that we get the benevolence of Krishna, the benediction of Krishna through you. And when Andal says what she really wants from the Lord, that probably is the pinnacle of all her strength and all her glory. For 30 days, the vrata goes. So she keeps on saying, I want this, I want that, we'll do this, we'll do that. But then, as she nears the completion of the vrata, she says, Krishna, you thought that we have come and stood here for the sake of some jewelry? You think that we came and stood here because we want some prizes from you? You know what I want? You know what kind of benediction do I seek? Have you thought of it? She asks. And then goes on to say, Itrai parinkolvan andrukan Govinda, Yetraikum, Yere piravikkum mundannodu utromi avo. Which means, Krishna, I don't want any prize for today. I don't want any of these things which are impermanent. You know what I want? I want to be all the time performing Kainkarya to you. Yezhu will mean 7 by 7. We can make 7 plus 7, 14, or we can say 7 by 7, 49. But she is very clear in saying, what number of births I have, I don't mind. But then I only want to be your slave and be of servitude to you in all my births. The kind of bhakti that Andal envisaged. She all the time wanted to be a slave to the Lord. She wanted all her devotion completely attached to the feet of the Lord. Etraikum Yezhu Piravikkum. I would only be wanting to perform Kainkarya to you, she said. And that is the ultimate Madhurya Bhava or the Nayaki Bhava that one can have. And all this when she grew up in Srivilliputtur as the daughter of Periyalvar. It is said that Periyalvar was commanded to bring Andal to Srirangam, and when she went to Srirangam with her father, and when she went into the temple, inside the temple, she just disappeared near the Sanctum Sanctorum of Lord Ranganatha, meaning that she had merged with Lord Ranganatha. We find a similar picture when we think of Meera. Meera also merged with Dwarakadisha. Meera was sent away from her land. She did not mind at all. She was given the information that the king of the land had asked that she be sent away from the land, from the country. She was kind of asked to quit the country and go away. When that information, when that command was brought to her, she said, I don't mind going, because this king has asked me to quit his country. I can quit, I can go elsewhere. But then if that king Krishna asks me to quit his country, where would I go? Everything is his, isn't it? And then she went to Dwarka. She remained in Dwarka. She would be in the temple of Dwarka all the time, singing the praises, hailing her Dwarakadish. And one day, when people saw her go into the temple, they could hear her voice singing praises of her Lord. Suddenly her voice stopped. They just went in and tried locating as to where she was. She could not be seen. The bodily form of Meera could not be seen. It was that her sari was on Dwarakadisha. It only implies that she merged with Dwarakadisha, and Dwarakadisha was happy draping her sari on himself. So we find such kind of women who were so strong in their devotion, so perseverant. They were stuck to their devotion and they were completely in Vairagya and could not be shattered, could not be shaken at all. We were talking about Uma a while ago, isn't it? Uma has another name. Goddess Parvati, in her incarnation as the daughter of Lord Himavan, has a name called Aparna. Why was she called Aparna? Parna is a leaf. Now please recall as to why was she called Uma by the mother. She was wanting to do penance. So this little girl went to the slopes of the Himalayas, thought of Lord Shiva and performed tapas, standing on one leg In that cold, icy area, she was performing tapas. And she would not even eat any food, not even one leaf. Those days, when the rishis performed tapas, they used to partake with probably some fruits once a day or once in 2 days or sometimes even once a week. And some rishis performed such kind of penance that they would not even partake with fruits, but then would partake with some kind of leaves, dry leaves, leaves which have fallen down. So they either had fruits or had leaves. We find information about Dhruva performing tapas. We find that Dhruva used to take in the first month of his penance, would take some fruits once in 3 days, and in the second month of his penance, he would take leaves once in 6 days. So Parnam was a kind of a food for those rishis who were performing austere penance. But then here was Uma, little girl she was. She would not even partake with leaves, not even dry leaves. No patram, no parnam. And that is why, since she would not even partake with Parnam, she was called Aparna. What does it mean? The inner strength that this little girl had. Women generally are labeled as biologically weaker. Yes, probably for various reasons, the bodies of women are made a little weaker biologically. If you think of even in these modern days, modern times, if you try and compare the bones of men and the bones of women, we may find that the bones of women are a little smaller in size. Maybe the bones are not as long as the bones of men would be. Naturally, women, we generally see average or an average, the women are a little shorter than men, right? So the bones could probably be of less weight, could probably be a little smaller in size, a little weaker. The muscles of men and women, if you compare, naturally the muscles are attached to the bones, so the muscles also could be a little weaker in women. And women, on an average, would be slightly less taller than men. All that is possible, but that is all biological. That is something to do with the body, something very physical. But there is something else called emotional. When it comes to the emotional strength of women, take it from me, women are stronger. We talk in terms of two quotients. One is called the intelligence quotient, the other one is called the emotional quotient. We all know, we all give importance to intelligence quotient. We talk about IQ, isn't it? IQ is important, of course, but then there is something called EQ, or the emotional quotient. EQ is the strength with which one can withstand pressures. And it is a scientific truth that women have better emotional quotient, meaning they could have vairagya, they could remain strong within their hearts. And that is what we find, such kind of vairagya is what we find in Uma, in Sita, in Andal, in Meera. All these had several difficulties which were from the external aspect. Sita was abducted away and kept in a place where she did not have a familiar face at all. She was in the Ashokavana, and in that Ashokavana she was surrounded by Rakshasis. None of those faces were familiar to her, but she was not bogged down. She remained, with her vairagya, and she would not even look up at Ravana. Similarly, Draupadi, she had so many difficulties around, but then her inner strength was such that all those difficulties she was able to circumvent. And we find Andal, she had her external difficulties. Meera, she also had so much of difficulties. People spoke so much about her. People badmouthed her. People said so many bad things about her. But she would not bother about any of those things because all her focus was on what she wanted, and that was Kaikarya to her Lord. So it is that inner strength that women have, and that is what we should learn and see. The emotional strength. It is not that life will not have difficulties at all. These women, whom we see as examples of great women of India, they had their own share of worldly difficulties. Some of them had poverty, some of them had some other difficulty, some of them had physical disability, some of them were talked in by others, some of them were diverted by others, but then within the heart of hearts, they all stood ground, and they were all so strong emotionally that they were able to circumvent whatever difficulties they had. And it is also true that because of this kind of strength, they were able to do many things, and they were able to do things independently. In the Mahabharata, we hear of the grandmother called Satyavati. Satyavati was the grandmother of Pandu and Dhritarashtra. And then Satyavati, as the Rajamata, was able to steer the women of the harem to a dharmic conclusion. We find Satyavati leading a big contingent of women, taking them to the forest to lead a life of vanaprastha. Similarly, we also find information on Satyabhama leading the wives of Krishna after the demise of Krishna to the forest to do penance. Was life so easy in the forest? No. Those days, the forests would have had wild animals. There would have been so many difficulties. How is it that these women were able to live in the forest? Simple. They were able to control themselves. They were able to control their emotions. They were able to see things in a neutral vision. And that is why these women, who all the time had lived in the palaces, were able to forsake everything else, leave everything else in the forest, leave everything else in the palace, and go to the forest. It was not that easy. It would not have been that easy. If any of us is asked to leave things just like that and go to the forest, how difficult it would be. But then how is it that these women were able to do that? They were able to do that because they had so much of self-control. They could control their own minds. They could control their own emotions. And that is why we say women are emotionally stronger. So, great women of India, if we list them, we find almost all of them were strong in their emotions. They could control themselves, and they could always see things in the correct perspective, and they could always do good to others. That is what is the greatness in them. They were able to do good to others, come what may to their own selves. Think of Sita. She was in the Ashokavana. But then she would not think of any harm to the Rakshasis, even when the Rakshasis were doing harm to her. Similarly, we find Satyavati would not do harm to others, even when she had her own share of difficulties. So it is this emotional strength that symbolizes the great woman of India if we think of her as one single personification of strength. Friends, let's remember these names. Let's remember that these women are there. We think of them, we think of their stories, we think of their lives because they could always motivate us and give us all the strength that we need to face our lives. Friends, let's stop here today and think of other great women of India in